Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was a whole bunch of information that is being given in 1 hour's time. I'm not sure how people can absorb all these information in such a small time. By that, like we will start the Q&A session. So we have received few questions from the participants, but however, you might have already covered it, you might have explained, but still, so doubts exist. So I'm going into the first question directly. How does this affect Kerala and its farmers? Being a consumer state, the involvement of corporates will result in the increase or decrease of prices for goods imported from other states. So you are on mute.
Should I take it one by one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. See, Kerala is a very unique state in this whole regard. Kerala never passed an APMC Act. So it did not have to, it doesn't have to repeal it. Kerala is a state, according to the central government, which requires no reforms. Because Kerala never had the act which it wants to repeal or amend, right? Why did Kerala never have an APMC Act from the 60s onwards? Is it because it did not have regard for the farmers' welfare? No. It is because APMC markets are required when there is a large surplus of a commodity which can be pushed into a wholesale market kind of a situation. That's what mandis do in other states. Which were those crops in Kerala? Tea, coffee, cardamom, pepper, rubber, etc. These were the crops which Kerala had surplus in. In these crops, there were already commodity boards of the central government: rubber board, coffee board, tea board, spices board, coconut development board, etc., which have their own marketing arrangements. For example, cardamom has a large e-auction system. Now it is e-auction. It was not earlier e-auction. It's a auction system of the spices board existed in cardamom. In tea board conducts tea auctions. Coffee board, well, certainly it did till 1998. After that, it sort of withdrew. But coffee board also had its own markets where everybody needed a license. Even in a crop like rubber, you need a rubber board license to do trading in rubber. So what this means is that there was some kind of regulation already present for crops which needed some amount of, which had some wholesale presence in Kerala, some surplus presence in Kerala. And so Kerala never felt the need for an APMC Act, right? What are the other crops? Rice, you're importing from other states. Vegetable, you're importing from other states. So we don't need an APMC market, right? You're all net consumers there. So net importers there. That is why Kerala never had an APMC Act. Now, as a result, in Kerala, legally speaking, there is no bar for any private person, Adani, Ambani, or a local small player in Kerala's villages. If they want to open a private market, if they want to collect directly from the farmers, there is absolutely no legal restriction. May I say, Kerala is a free market, right? And that's why the central government says no reform. So Kerala is not directly affected by APMC in that sense. But what Kerala needs, however, Kerala has a lot of small markets. Kerala needs some amount of regulation for itself because now the markets are they are unregulated, right? You need some good regulation helps. So Kerala will have to have some amount of legislation. That's my personal view in the marketing sector, which will help the farmers. Number one. This is more important also because in the last 10 or 15 years, many commodity boards of the Ministry of Commerce are slowly withdrawing from marketing of those commodities. Right? The coffee board has totally withdrawn from procurement of coffee. The spices board, it's there, but it's only largely present in cardamom. It's not there in pepper. It's not there in turmeric. It's not there in ginger, etc. It's not there. So there is some need, but the point about Kerala is, even though it is a free market, the question is, has private investment come? That's a question to ask. Private investment has not come, which is what the bill is claiming. We had the last 60 years, like waiting for Godot. We are actually waiting for the private market. No private market has come in Kerala. Right? This primarily means that the possibility of a private market emerging is very poor, and you will still need state investment to come in, state involvement to come in, public involvement to come in. May it be cooperatives, may it be direct involvement of the state government, agriculture department, that has to be thought of. But we need some amount of regulation in Kerala, number one. Number two, contract farming. There is no regulation in Kerala. Right? In fact, a lot of contract farming activities already happen in Kerala. Spices, oleoresin, spices extracts, safed musli, vanilla, right? In all these crops, there are companies from Karnataka, Hyderabad, Tamil Nadu, etc. coming in. There are even some German companies in this business, Bergwerf and so on. They come in and they procure directly from the farmers and go. There's a lot of exploitation happening there because in many cases, the companies breach the contracts. They don't pay the farmer the agreed price and they cannot go to the court. Right? So as a result, in contract farming also, Kerala would require a state level legislation which will have a series of farmer friendly provisions which protect the farmer in the case of breach of contracts from the exploitative tendencies of private corporate firms entering the business. So Kerala is a unique state, right? But Kerala will be affected in terms of MSP and so on because central government is actively asking Kerala to reduce its MSP from 27.5 rupees per kg to its MSP at the central level. It is threatening to stop procurement from Kerala if Kerala continues with the bonus that it provides to the farmer. Kerala will have to resist those tendencies. Right? That is why the Kerala government thinks that you are unnecessarily creating a problem in what is our field, in what is our jurisdiction. You are violating the federal principles. Why don't you just shut up? Right? That's a question that Kerala is asking the central government. Right? So it has sought a legal opinion whether it is possible for Kerala to challenge this acts in the Supreme Court. Punjab, I hear, is already going to do that. But we will know soon about what Kerala is going to do.
Thank you, sir. I also would like to invite Khalijan, who will be sharing the questions with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Raju. There is a question as to how will this affect the agricultural workers who work under a farmer? As the corporates step in, will they force the farmer to select their commodity of interest to cultivate and the modern techniques also and fertilizers as advised by them? How does that work out?
Here, we are largely talking about the contract farming contracts that happen and experience that we have from across the world, of course, particularly in African countries, Latin American countries, etc., to begin with, and of course within India. For example, the contracts that Pepsi company enters with potato farmers in Gujarat, tomato farmers in Punjab, jerkin farmers in Tamil Nadu, etc. If you look at the studies that have been conducted on these contracts, you will see the farmer A is not getting a fascinating price to begin with. It is very comparable to the price that he's receiving in a APMC mandi kind of a setup. Number one. Number two, the farmer faces a lot of breaches of contract, as I've already said. Number three, your question about agricultural laborers. In many cases, the contracts incorporate certain provisions to do mechanized operations. In order to reduce labor costs, they insist on certain mechanizations of operations. In such cases, there is a possibility that agricultural laborers will lose employment. Other possibility is that in many cases, in order to reduce labor costs, in order to reduce production costs, there is a promotion of female labor at very low wages, even the employment of child labor. Right? All these are problems that have emerged in the contract farming settings that we have seen in other regions, states, countries, etc. This is the reason why we need better regulation. This is the reason why we need regulations that are largely in conformity with the glorious social traditions of Kerala, labor-friendly provisions we would need, where we would ensure that these exploitative tendencies can be kept in check. The possibilities of the company breaching the contract can be kept in check. And the state level, customized legislations at the state level will be more farmer-friendly than what is being thrust upon us from the center.
So the third question is, how can this affect the functioning of societies and other farmer unions, especially outside Kerala?
Farmer unions?
Yep. The societies and the farmer unions.
You mean cooperative societies? Is that to begin with, there aren't many. societies outside, even in Kerala, there ain't much. But the whole idea of collective action in farming, cooperative collective action of farming doesn't quite exist with that kind of presence in India as a whole. Okay? There are cooperatives here and there, but they are not in production. There are credit cooperatives, there are some marketing cooperatives, etc., but there are not production cooperatives, many production cooperatives. That is why this whole question of aggregation comes up as a very important problem in India. You still have large number of small and marginal farmers who produce their own crops, their own varieties, their own seeds, their own technologies, etc. So it all lies in a very fragmented state across India. That is why private investment is unlikely to come in, because it takes enormous amount of transaction cost to mop up this produce from rural areas. Right? That is the reason why you need state involvement. That is the reason why the central government is saying, central government knows it. That is why the central government is saying we should be promoting farmer producer organizations or cooperatives, etc. Because somebody has to do that dirty job of aggregation and providing it on a platter to the private corporate retailer. Right? Who doesn't want to get into that dirty job and incur the costs and probably suffer in that economically suffer in that process. Okay, so that dirty job will be done by some FPO cooperative, etc. But we will be there as the buyer of that big quantity once that aggregation is done. Right? So so my answer to your question is, to begin with, we do not have enough cooperative enterprises in agriculture. Okay, so particularly in the sphere of production, right? And that is so in some sense it's not something that bothers you a lot, because there are very few to begin with, right? But the alternative path that is put forward by states like Kerala is that we should have more of those such cooperatives, which will operate within a larger market-friendly policy regime, which would benefit the farmer rather than adversely affect.
The next question we have is, it has been observed that the Congress-led states are moving against the bill legally. On which legal terms can they execute it? How effective do you think that can be?
I'll make 2 points here. First, the Congress party is absolutely insincere in this argument. If you look at the Congress party's election manifesto of 2019, election manifesto of the parliament elections of 2019, there is a very clear statement there. If we come to power, we will repeal the APMC acts, not amend, repeal the APMC acts. Okay, it's very clear. Now, Mr. Chidambaram is writing articles in newspapers trying to concoct a completely complex interpretation of this promise made in the election manifesto to sort of wriggle out of the difficult situation that they are in, because their own government in Punjab is actually resisting these acts. So Congress party is completely it's a completely neoliberal party in terms of its economics. There is no difference in the economic policies of the Congress government and the BJP government. The only allowance that I'll give to the Congress government is they didn't bring in a central act and trample upon the states' rights. Okay, that one thing they did. I must confess. But so they only sent model acts to the state governments. Please pass, right? They didn't do it on their own. That's one thing. So point number one. Point number two is, what is the legal ground? The legal ground, I said with the ITC case example that I gave, the argument is the following. Now, if there are two legislations, okay, there is a central legislation which has come now, and there is an existing APMC legislation in states, which would prevail? The question is, if the subject matter being discussed is in the concurrent list of the Constitution, then the central law will prevail and the state law will become repugnant. The state law will be annulled because they are in the concurrent list, and the center has some amount of expanded powers compared to the states. So if the subject is in the concurrent list, then the central law will prevail. But if it is in the state list, or if it is in the union list, then state governments cannot legislate. That's well known. But if it's in the state list, state governments have an exclusive authority to legislate. Okay, so entry 14, agriculture, is a state subject. Entry 28 in the state list, which is markets and fairs, which is not subject to entry 33, in the concurrent list, as is 26 and 27, is also exclusively a state subject. This is why the Supreme Court's constitutional bench in 2002 said that even though there is a Tobacco Board Act of 1975, the Bihar APMC can continue to collect mandi tax from ITC when it collects tobacco directly from the growers. Okay, so both will exist. So in other words, legally speaking, this ruling basically provides state governments with continuing rights. They can continue to charge mandi tax from the private players if they wish to. So in my view, the central government's farm acts have very poor legal validity. Okay, state governments can continue to do what they want. That is what the Congress governments are. In fact, Abhishek Singhvi had argued against the ITC in the 2002 case. So he knows the legal situation there. That is why they are advising the state governments to enact state legislations which would prevail. The problem, however, is that the president has to sign those bills passed by assemblies. Only then it becomes an act. The president will not sign. The president is a rubber stamp of the BJP, right? So, it's a political act, what the Congress is trying. The president will never sign it, and it will never become an act. But they would have made a political statement. While the real question is, will you go to the Supreme Court and challenge it on the constitutional grounds of federalism? That is a litmus test for the Congress.
So the next question, I believe the same question has been raised by Nishad as well. Nishad asked almost a similar question, whether you have replied back, and this question was basically, has Congress party changed their stand over issue over time? And I think you have already replied back to that. Now I'm coming to the fifth question, which is basically, central government say that those who oppose the bill are agents of middlemen. How do you foresee that? How do you see that?
Let me begin by saying that this middleman is not a bad man. The middleman is not a villain. Okay, the middleman exists because you have an agrarian system in India where production is dispersed unequally, geographically unequally. So you have some surplus states, some deficit states. The stuff has to move from Punjab to Kerala. Somebody has to move it, right? So there will be a middleman. You cannot escape a middleman. Currently, the middleman is the government, the FCI, at least for a large part of the produce, right? The rest is elsewhere, but the large part is with the government. The private corporate sector wants control of that quantity which is under the control of the government now. They want to usurp it to increase their volumes. That is a motive. That's a motivation behind these bills, okay, or acts. Number one. Number two is this whole point that I was trying to make here was that all the three acts, what they're essentially trying to do is to expand the possibilities of the private corporate sector. I mean, they have to come and say it. That's all, right? Expand the possibility of expansion of the private sector in the field of agricultural marketing. Now, within that argument, if they are saying that when the corporate player comes, there will be no middleman, then they are living in a fool's paradise. Right? The corporate sector will simply outsource different operations of collection of produce from the farmer to multiple agents. Okay, the FCI manager will now be replaced by a guy who will be wearing a tie. That's all. Right? He'll be known by a name. What is it? A rural collection manager, instead of an Arhatia, right? Which is not a fashionable name. Right? We will have more fashionable names coming in. A communications manager will be there. There will be a procurement manager. There will be a storage manager. There will be fancy positions there. There will be a vice president involved. So all these fancy stuff will come, but every guy will take his commission. Every guy will continue to extract a margin out of this whole process, and transaction costs will remain. They will remain in another name. So that's why I said mandi tax will simply be replaced by something else. It may not be called mandi tax, but there will still be a margin that will be extracted out, and the farmer is unlikely to get a higher price at the end of it. So this whole argument that middleman will disappear is completely bogus. Okay. In fact, I suspect that the number of middlemen may actually increase if private companies play, because they will be trying out different models of outsourcing activities. which they try different forms of industrial organization. They try. They will experiment with multiple models. They already have multiple models, and the number of middlemen are likely to sometimes rise, not fall.
The next question we have is that in Kerala, we have generally the middle class and lower middle class farmers with defined labor and farm laws. So what would be or could be the impact of the new laws specifically to Kerala? You're in mute.
Kalijan, I've already answered that question because I said that Kerala is already a free market in that regard. And I said that Kerala actually requires better legislation rather than no legislation. And the farm bills that are the farm acts now simply do not fulfill that purpose. So you actually need customized state level farmer friendly legislations which will protect the interests of the farmer in the state. That's what I've already provided that answer in response to another question a little while back.
Thank you.
Arshad TK. Arshad, would you like to raise this question? Arshad, you there?
You can do it. You can do it now.
Okay. Arshad TK is asking, if agriculture is under state list, how has the central government bought in this act? Can't we challenge this in the court? Or have they used any loophole in the system?
You had mentioned it, but
I've already mentioned it. They used
yes.
entry 33 in the concurrent list. Entry 26 and 27 in the state list are subject to entry 33 in the concurrent list, right? And they have used that entry 33 in the concurrent list to push this legislation at the central level. This, however, it can be unconstitutional because markets and fairs are entry 28 in the state list, which are not subject to entry 33 in the concurrent list. Right? So state governments can say, entry 14, agriculture is an exclusively state subject. Entry 28, markets and fairs, is exclusively a state subject, not subject to entry 33 in the concurrent list. Okay. As a result, we have full powers, constitutional powers, to enact whatever legislation is required with respect to an exclusively state subject, and everything that is subsidiary or ancillary to that exclusive subject would also fall under the legislative purview of the state government. And a very strong case, I think, to challenge this constitutionality of these acts in the Supreme Court.
Thank you.
We have actually two questions from Hari Narayanan. Shall our unions take part in meetings called by the center and demand for JPC interference and each state assemblies to pass these for implementing in respective list? This is one. And he's also asking, is it possible Kerala and Punjab state governments fight together in court against these bills? Other states are not reliable in farmers' issues.
Kalijan, what is the first question? I couldn't hear it properly.
Yeah. Shall our unions take part in meeting called by the center and demand?
Yes,
JPC,
I got it. Yeah. Okay. The point is, there have actually been no consultations with farmers' bodies or unions prior to the formulation or passage of these bills. So nobody received an invitation from the central government to participate in any meeting. Even after the bills have been passed into acts, there is no consultation that is happening. So the question of whether to attend a meeting or not will depend upon whether you receive an invitation. Right? When you have not received an invitation, the decision to participate or not participate is redundant. Right? It doesn't arise. But of course, if there is a meeting, we should go and say what we have to say. Oppose it, of course, no doubt about it. Number one. Number two is Kerala and Punjab doing it together. See, whether we do it together or separately, the point is the Supreme Court will single petition. Okay, if Kerala and Punjab file two different cases, ultimately they will have to argue it together because Supreme Court is not going to hear two cases separately. They will be bunched towards a single bench, and Kerala will have its advocate, Punjab will have its advocate, and it will be arguing. So, and that depends if Kerala decides to go. I mean, I don't know the legal opinion that is received, so I cannot say anything on that. But the point is, if Kerala goes and if Punjab also goes, then it will certainly be a single case anyway in the Supreme Court. They will bunch it into a single case.
So I believe you answered this question, but still I would like to reiterate this. There is an argument that even with the new act, MSP is not going to go away. MSPs will continue. How true is this? This is a question from Nishad.
Yeah, and I have answered that. Sorry to keep saying that. So I've answered that because I give 3 reasons why I believe that MSP system is in deep crisis, in the threat of being dismantled. One is this government has not raised MSPs at all. It actually believes that MSPs will raise inflation, number 1. Number 2, it does not pay good MSP to the farmer. It does not go by the Swaminathan formula of providing or fixing MSPs at 50% higher than the cost of production. And the farmer is already suffering a loss of 300-400 rupees per quintal on that front. The final point I mentioned was this whole MSP bonus that states provide is being challenged by the center. States like Kerala are not going to be able to give the higher MSP that they are providing to farmers for crops like paddy. So all these things give the impression, is a very clear indication that the MSP procurement system. On the other hand, the PDS system, the ration shop system, there is a great threat of it being the economic survey of the central government has been arguing it for many years that you have to convert, you have to shut down PDS, to shut down the ration shops and simply convert it into a cash transfer to the BPL households. So that is another. So the argument is weaken the MSP on the one hand and shut down PDS on the other. So the whole MSP system will become irrelevant, right? Completely weakened to the point of irrelevance, may I say, right? It'll become completely irrelevant. It may exist on paper, no doubt. There'll be a official announcement of MSP every year, but that would not have any meaning if the central government does not procure on that basis. So unless procurement expands, these MSPs have no basis. And because procurement is under threat, MSP is also under threat. And if that happens, and if APMC mandis are weakened, then the field is open for private corporate players to take over and monopolize the sector. That's the threat that we are facing. So it's a contingent threat, but it's a threat nevertheless.
The next question we have is from Senthil. He says it was told that the whole farm bill will be advantageous for corporates, but it was also told that corporate would be better off buying produce from APMC in one go. So his doubt is how abolition of APMC would help corporates in this context.
Yeah, that's a fair question because I guessed that might have given rise to that question. The point I was making is the following: on the whole, if you see, are private markets going to come in a big way? I think no. Number one. Number two, but does that mean that private markets will not come at all? No, that's not what I'm saying. Private markets will come in certain areas, certain crops where the economics is conducive for them, where the viability in a financial sense exists for their presence and entry. In those cases, private markets will come in, they will dominate, and the state and central governments, which are generally friendly to corporates, will open all doors in those specific crops, those specific regions, to promote corporate presence in agriculture. So both will happen. So what I said is not contradictory. As I said it is not likely to lead to a large-scale presence of private markets, but at the same time, it might lead to a weakening of APMCs, which will lead to anarchy and chaos. Possibility number one. Possibility number two, which can coexist with possibility number one, is that private markets will come in certain areas where they find it profitable or attractive in a financial sense. And in those cases, there will be dominance of the private corporate players, and they will take over they will take over market power in those crops. So, and set the prices at their levels. So this is both are likely to happen, and they're not contradictory. That's what I wanted to say.
The next question is from Jayakumar Sugadan. Jayakumar, are you here? If you want to raise the question directly to Ramakumar, it is possible. Would you like to raise this question, Jayakumar Sugadan? Okay, I'm going to ask this question. So basically, Jayakumar is asking, how is the left movement going to mobilize farmers and continuing with this agitation against this Farm Act? And how do we ensure a minimum price guarantee to farmers considering the production cost irrespective of who comes to purchase? Again, you might have answered it, but
let me take up the larger question of the role of the left movement here. I think it's extremely important. I think it is to begin with, it is the left in India that has consistently raised a voice against neoliberal policies in agriculture. May I say, it is the only political force in India, not Congress, not BJP, not regional parties that you have, not AAP, none of these parties have taken a strong position, political and ideological position against neoliberal policies in the economy and more specifically in agriculture. No question about it. Okay, that's an undisputed fact. Number two, on the ground, who is agitating on the ground? Yes, in Punjab, actively promoted by the state government there are protests that are happening. Rahul Gandhi went there, did a tractor rally and so on. Punjab, Haryana, those areas, there is some presence. But who is struggling in the rest of India? It is the All India Kisan Sabha. All India Kisan Sabha, which is a frontal mass organization of the left parties in India, which is leading the movement in most other states, including in states like Kerala. So if you see very clearly, the flag of resistance is being held up by the left to this act also, these acts also. Number two. Number three, how do you take it forward? It is not an easy task. Now, this is an area, this is an issue where the left movement has to bring in larger sections of the rural society under its umbrella to sort of convert the struggle against these three acts into a struggle to protect the Constitution of India, to protect democracy in India, right? So it has to be elevated to that level of a struggle to protect democracy and the Constitution, because this is a frontal attack on the constitutional principles on federalism also, right? So that sort of escalation in a political sense, in an ideological sense, can be achieved only by the left. It is only the left which has the ideological capacity and the political willingness and conviction to traverse that path. Every other country, every other party in this country has cheated the farmers of this country with respect to what they promised and what they end up doing. It is only the left that has been sincere, both in its argument and in its action with respect to agriculture in particular, and of course the economy as a whole, but we are talking about agriculture here. So I think the role of the left is important in an ideological sense, in a political sense. Now it will also become in a legal sense, because we'll have, there might be challenges to the legal challenges in the Constitution. There again, you will see who is going to go to the court, which governments will go to the court. It will be clear who stands where when that phase opens up. So I think the role of the left is very important to begin with. Number two, I think the left will have a very important task at hand, which is to bring in larger sections of the society into the ambit of this movement and to convert it into a movement to protect democracy and the Constitution itself. That's how this whole struggle. This is not a struggle just for farmers, right? There is a whole struggle against electricity privatization in Uttar Pradesh, which ended in a great success today morning with the Yogi Adityanath government agreeing not to privatize the power sector. It's a huge victory for electricity employees of Uttar Pradesh. Who would have thought that they would stand up and win this great battle against that loony autocrat called Yogi Adityanath, right? So that is very clearly another sign. So there are different struggles happening in different parts of the country. There are different struggles happening on different issues across the country. All those have to be converged into a certain platform where a unified voice of resistance is heard and felt. That's where the role of the left becomes important. Historically, the left's role has been paramount in creating that common platform. And in this case also, the left will continue to play, will have to continue to play that role. And I'm sure it will do that as well.
The next question is from Adarsh. Adarsh, would you like to ask Professor Ramkumar directly?
Yeah, it's regarding this contract farming, these forward contracts by these corporates. There is no, it's surprising, there is no obligation on the corporate side to respect the contract or something like that. In the same way, what if happens like the commodity price is increased and the farmer wishes to sell by breaking the contract? Is there any legal restriction on the farmer side?
See, a contract is a contract. Okay, the farmer has to fulfill it, and the company will also have to fulfill it. We cannot say that the farmer should have the freedom to break the contract. That's a bit unfair, right? There should be some legal sanctity to the contract. The point is, if you see, of course, if the farmer doesn't sell, the company takes the farmer to court. What happens to that potato farmer in Gujarat? Right? Crores of rupees were asked in defamation or compensation by Pepsi because the farmers use their seeds for other purposes. Right? So the company has no qualms in going to the court and asking crores of rupees of compensation from poor farmers. Right? But does the reverse hold true? That is, can the farmer take the company to the court? That is a question that we have to examine, because the farmer is the weaker player in the contract. Right? And the question to ask is whether our legislation provides adequate safeguards to the farmer, who is the weaker player in the contract, against the possibilities of breach of contract from the part of the company. That's a question to ask. The answer is the bill does not provide, the act does not provide, the Central Act does not provide that. And that is why in states like Kerala, we might need a farmer-friendly state-level legislation to create a farmer-friendly ecosystem in contract farming. Because you're not going to ban contract farming. That's not a possibility. It's a free country. We're not living in a totalitarian country, right? So while respecting the freedom of the farmer, we should hold the farmer's interest supreme in any such contract farming arrangement. That's what legislative actions should strive towards, or strive for. I'm sorry.
The next question is from Arvind, CET 87 batch. Arvind, would you like to raise this question, please, to sir directly?
Hello, Professor RAMAKUMAR. I just wanted to ask, in this scenario where the APMC is taken away and the government controls are gone, now there is some control by the government of what is needed to be produced in the larger interest of the nation. But when these corporates come into play, will it be based on the demands, or will the demand to supply situation itself will get manipulated so that the larger interest of the nation, as we said, they go for fruits and the high yielding fruits or such kind of stuff instead of the wheat and rice that the nation needs. So what kind of influence will the corporates play on that, and how detrimental will that be to the national interest?
See, the fear that has been raised is if food security concerns or concerns of national self-reliance are completely divorced from the decisions taken by the private companies, then what will happen is these private companies will decide on the cropping pattern on the basis of demand. True, but what demand? It will not be domestic demand. Large part of it will be also external demand, which has nothing to do with the food security concerns of the country. Right? So they are looking at export markets, they are looking at high value exports, etc., which might be detrimental to larger food security concerns. So that's a possibility. Okay, if it happens on a very large scale, that's a possibility. So while we understand that we cannot go on with rice wheat everywhere, farmers will have to diversify to increase their incomes and so on. That has to be a very carefully thought out strategy in order to not affect the food security concerns adversely, while at the same time also results in increase in incomes to the farmer. So while diversification is not necessarily a bad idea, the question is, how do you bring that about? What is the pathway that you adopt to bring diversification about? The pathway that is chosen by the current government appears to be leave the field open to private corporate players and let them decide according to their profitability concerns and demand concerns. But if there is an increased involvement of the government in this regard, including the state government in this regard, then it is quite possible that the whole policy can be tempered to ensure that the food security concerns are also factored into cropping pattern decisions on cropping pattern. But the bill does not provide any room for that kind of discussion. The bill does not provide any room for that kind of possibilities. It simply leaves the field open for private firms. That's a problem that I see here.
Next question is from Sudhir Gopal. We've just got 2 more questions left. We will limit it because we have crossed the time. Is the previous APMC acts, do they completely prohibit selling agricultural produce beyond the mandis? What is the truth behind the claim that now that restriction is removed?
2 points. Legally, it is true that under the earlier APMC Act, you cannot sell outside the mandi because the mandi has exclusive power over the notified area. But the realities of economics on the ground would mean that the APMCs never really insisted this would happen, because somebody else had to, if somebody else wanted to collect it from the farmers and then bring it to the mandis were always open to that. Okay, so it did allow a lot of private collection outside. It did allow a lot of private, informal private markets to exist outside, which helped the APMC, because ultimately the stuff is going to be collected and brought to the APMC. They didn't mind it. Okay, so these private markets and that freedom to sell to whoever outside already existed de facto, even though not de jure, in rural areas. That's point number 1. Point number 2, what this act does is to make it legal also, not just de facto, but also de jure. Right now, what will happen? So that is one reason why I am completely, I'm not confident that a lot of private investment would come, because if it had to come, it would have come already. In many, for example, Bihar completely repealed its APMC Act in 2006. 15 years have passed. Nothing has happened on private investment in Bihar. Not a rupee has come. In fact, farmers have been pushed to more unregulated, anarchic, chaotic markets which are unregulated rather than regulated mandis of that sense. Maharashtra delisted fruits and vegetables in 2016. Fruits and vegetables have nothing to do with APMCs anymore. They can come, but they can go outside also freely. Has that led to the emergence of private markets? Look at it. The private markets per se handle only about 4,000 crore turnover in Maharashtra. What does APMCs do? 50,000 crore. You're against 50,000 crore, you're at 4,000 crore, right? What kind of multiplication would be required to reach what the APMCs do? That scale is unmatched in agricultural marketing. That's why mandis are so powerful. You cannot simply displace them. You cannot simply take them away, but you can weaken them through these things. Right? You can take away their powers, you can weaken them, and ultimately push them towards some kind of irrelevance. That is possible. That's the fear among a lot of farmers and farmers organizations about what this act might do. Right? While we need more strengthening of APMC, let me also say this: are we saying that APMCs are completely fault-free? They are completely the perfect institutions? No, nobody is making that point. Okay, APMCs have a lot of problems. They need internal reform. Okay, should we try to bring in commission agents, bring down the number of commission agents? We should try. Should we try unified licenses? If you have a license in one mandi, you can trade in any other mandi in India. Of course, we need it. Okay, should we link all mandis to the e-NAM platform? Yes, we should do it. Right, but these are all efforts to strengthen APMCs, not to weaken APMCs. Unfortunately, what the bill does is to contribute to a weakening process, not to a strengthening process.
We're getting into the last 2 questions.
You've been saying last 2 for a long time.
Last, make it the last. It's okay. Yeah.
Better make it the last.
Last.
Yeah. If so, I would like to club 2 questions, because the last question is very important for us.
No, I was joking. Please go ahead with 2. No problem.
Sir, the last 2 questions, I'm going to club these last 2 questions, being the second part of the question being very important, as we all are engineers and this program is being organized by progressive minded engineers. So it is a very relevant question for us as well. So I'm going to the first part of the last question, which is: corporate farming will bring technology to Indian farming, especially storage and transportation. Farming, storage and transportation. It will minimize the loss of wastages as current APMC or FCI failed to do so. This is what they say. Okay. How far this is true?
Let me give you an example. Okay, one of my friends used to work in a private company, which is a big private corporate retail giant involved in this. I took that name sometime during my presentation, but I will not take it again. That big private company had a large number of retail stores in Mumbai. Okay, and one of the things that happened was the company. So it had rural collection centers first. It tried to open a lot of rural collection centers in villages, but they couldn't find that to be a viable model. So they shut down a lot of those rural collection centers. Instead, they went to the APMC and these companies which are supposed to bring in new investment, they simply went to the APMC and bought from there because they found that to be more viable. Okay. Then they brought it to the showroom. And this friend told me that that's where the problem began. That's one reason why the company downscaled its activities there, because the floor manager of that retail outlet was given the freedom to discard up to 30% of the produce which came to that retail outlet as damage, because it's a perishable. Fruits and vegetables are perishables. So a lot of damages are there. So up to 30% can be discarded and only 70% can be accounted for. Not less than 70% should be accounted for. So 30% can be discarded. In this big corporate firm, there was enormous amount of corruption, okay, which meant that in every retail outlet, all floor managers ensured that 30% was indeed damaged. They were basically diverting it and selling outside. Okay, so this became such a big headache for the company that the company finally downscaled its food procurement and sale operations in a big way. Okay, I took that name of that company as I was saying it. So I want just to protect my friend's identity. I don't want to say it. So this meant that this 30% is wastage. Right? This 30% is being consistently wasted. Nobody talks about it. Right? Take FCI, Food Corporation of India. Why do rats eat grains there? Because you are not giving it to the hungry people of India through your ration shop system. If you unload all your excess food stocks there, you should only keep 21 million tons of food grains today. You have 75 million tons of food grains in your FCI go down. And lakhs and millions of people are going hungry in villages and cities. Why can't you simply take that grain out and give it to them free of cost? Instead, you're more worried about the food security of rats in this country than of human beings. And then you cry hoarse about wastage. Rats eating FCI food grains and so on. Who asked you to keep it in the FBI? Put it out into the market. Give it to the poor. Give it to the hungry. You don't do that. But you want to discredit the reputation of the FCI. So one, you will not invest in FCI go downs to create modern storage facilities. Two, you will not distribute it to the poor, and you allow the food grain to rot. And then you will allow a Times of India photographer to go there and take a photograph of it and put it on the front page and say, oh, look, all our public institutions are bad and rats eat all the food grains in our country. Right? This is the sad situation that we are in. So this whole argument about wastage in public institutions is actually largely a bogus argument, because private institutions have similar amounts of wastage to begin with, number one. Number two, this wastage is largely occurring because of the faulty policies of the government. If they had correct policies to unload it in time to feed the hungry people of this country, there wouldn't be that wastage. So I'm not very impressed by this wastage argument that is usually put forward by these neoliberals.
So I understand. So in summary, it is kill it and own it in a later on stage. Okay, sir. The last question is, see, as you know, this has been organized by Technos Global and Technos Connect. We as progressive-minded and socially committed engineers, is there anything we can do to support the farmers while facing this challenge?
Well, see, it's not an easy question to answer because engineers have come with enormous variations in skills. So there is not one thing that all engineers can do. But what I do see, even today in, I think I read it in the Mathrubhumi newspaper of today or yesterday, I read about an engineer coming out with a big agri startup. Basically using the benefits of technology, using the benefits of mobile applications and so on, trying to aggregate the produce of the farmer, trying to create some amount of aggregation in the value chain, which will ultimately benefit the farmer with a higher price. So a lot of these startups are actually coming up in agriculture. And I must say that a lot of these startups are actually spearheaded by engineers. That's a very good thing. And that's probably because the technology backing that they bring in. So I do see a lot of engineers coming into these startups, and I hope that over a period of time, these will get aligned with different farmer producer organizations, groups of farmers, etc., and create resilient supply chains which are farmer friendly and not big corporate friendly. And they will remain startups and they don't get bought up by big corporates over time. That's my wish. But unfortunately, many of them are sold out also. I hope that doesn't happen. So that's one set of things that are possible. The other set of things that are possible is, see, there are a lot of, let me put it this way. Farmers in India are largely small and marginal farmers. They are in need of agricultural implements which are friendly for use by small and marginal farmers and not biased in favor of large farmers. They can't buy tractors, for example, so they need implements and small powered vehicles, etc., which they can use in their farm. So you need agricultural implements that are designed for better usage of the small and marginal farmers, which are also women friendly. Okay, all these things are required. For example, do we have a good implement in Kerala which you can use in the homesteads of Kerala by that household member itself? Okay, which reduces the drudgery of labor, which uses machine power to ensure that they can mow the grass, not grass, the weeds in the 10 to 20 cents that you might. To do basic agricultural operations like shallow plowing and so on. Do we have implements of that sort which our middle class can actually buy and do it in their own compounds or homesteads? You need better designs of implements of that sort. There again, engineers can play a very important role. They can play a very good role there. So there are many areas like this where the power of technology can actually be used, can be harnessed to reduce the drudgery of labor. This is often said, do we have a good coconut climber in Kerala? And we always complain about lack of coconut climbing workers in Kerala, right? But we have a good coconut climbing machine, which any member of the household can use to climb up the coconut tree and harvest the coconuts. We don't have. We have some here and there, but they are not still sophisticated for good use. That's another area. Final area is, I always wondered about this. Why doesn't some enterprising set of engineers or agricultural graduates or whoever get together, pool some money, and start a very interesting, I'm giving an example, there are many like this, a tender coconut firm, tender coconut water Tetra Pak, as you call it, right? With some amount of preservative. The technologies are available. The KAU has technologies. The CFTRI in Mysore has technology. Everybody has technologies in this area, but no group is coming forward to actually invest in this sector, take some amount of risk, and you go to these big malls that are there in the cities. You get these Tetra Packs of tender coconut water. You see where it is made in Thailand, right? So then I'll tell you another thing. You go to airports and these big malls. You get this new bottle called Raw Pressery, right? Raw Pressery is a juice making company that has come up in a big way. RAW, Raw Pressery, PRESSERY. I once had a conversation with the owner of Raw Pressery. I asked him, "Where is your factory?" It's in Panvel in Mumbai. About 40 kilometers from here, from where I live. So I asked him, where do you buy your coconuts from? You know what he said? I was expecting Karnataka, Kerala, etc. He said, I import it from Thailand. Right? I import it from Thailand. I said, you import it from Thailand? No, that's the best coconut I can get. I said, why don't you contact a farmer producer organization in Kerala? Okay. So he has, I need 25,000 nuts a month. Will you give me? And I mean, what I'm trying to say is the possibilities exist where you can have industrial investments in agro processing in Kerala, while at the same time, which are which help the farmers to obtain a better price, obtain a better market system, and so on. There again, engineers can play a very important role. They can bring in they are into different kinds of entrepreneurial initiatives. Why not in agriculture? Why not in startups? Why not in aggregation? These are possibilities that exist. So I would say engineers like you have a very major role to play in this regard. A very important, very viable and attractive possibilities exist in this sector, which engineers can make use of, using their skills in technology, using their skills in engineering. That's what I would say.
Thank you, sir. By this, there is no more questions. Now you can relax. You can drink water. No worries. Sir, this is one of the most interactive sessions which Technos Global and Technos Connect have done so far. You have been so patient with us. You have been so cooperative with us, and we are obliged. At the same time, we have very less words to say more about the session that you have done, sir. I'm sure
I enjoyed it too. Thank you very much.
So you enjoyed means that the quality of questions were pretty high. That's why you enjoyed it. Okay, and I'm sure like people will watch these sessions 3 or 4 times, because I'm sure most of the people who participated in this are defending the left organizations elsewhere. So they need to have a clarity on what when somebody else asks us, they need to have a clarity. And I'm 100% sure that this has given more than 100% clarity to the people, and they will be more than happy to see them again and again. Thank you, sir.